Chu, you put Johnny Depp on the stand. It's always a high-risk strategy. It worked for you. If you were representing Sean Diddy Combs, would you put him up?
Well, we put Johnny up because he was telling the truth. So that was a very easy decision to make, and he had the burden of proof, and frankly, we couldn't have stopped him even if we wanted to, but we didn't want to. Telling the truth as he did over several days, you're not telling the truth, skilled attorneys on the other side are going to puncture that. I believe in that system. I think in this case, I don't think he's got any choice. Given that video, he's got to explain it. I think that his counsel have a team of investigators following the jurors around to the extent they can and looking for any electronic footprint.
Johnny Depp's powerhouse lawyer, Ben Chu, just exposed a critical flaw in Diddy's defense, and it's sending shockwaves through the courtroom. As Diddy's high-stakes trial unfolds, things are already going sideways. Jury selection was a mess, the defense is scrambling, and now the internet is buzzing over Chu's brutal analysis. He didn't hold back, pointing out a move that could completely unravel Diddy's legal game. But Diddy's legal team are doing their best to hold on. They're filing applications and destroying the credibilities of victims. The question is, would it be enough? Well, Chu's instincts are telling him that Diddy might be heading for a legal disaster. Just what's happening. Is Chu right? Who's taking the lead here? Let's find out. So, Diddy's trial is underway. The former music mogul's fate now hangs in the hands of a bunch of jurors who were all meticulously chosen. But do you know what's interesting? It almost seemed like no one wanted to sit for jury duty when it came to Diddy. The court had to make moves to make people stay on. For example, Judge Arun Subramanian, who is presiding over the case in New York, decided that jury selection will wrap up on Monday morning because of concerns that jurors might drop out over the weekend if the panel was finalized on Friday as originally planned. Combs' defense team had requested the delay, but prosecutors had opposed the postponement. In the end, the defense team got the win. And so, after 3 days, a pool of 100 prospective jurors was narrowed to 12 jurors and 6 alternates. The jurors selected represent a wide cross-section of the surrounding state of New York, with ages ranging from 30 to 74 years old. One juror is a deli clerk at Gristed's grocery store, another is a dietary aide at a nursing home, and another is an administrative officer in the cyber terrorism office at the United Nations. One juror is a retired Verizon field tech. The selection process was ruthless. The defense tried its best to root out all kinds of bias. One juror was disqualified when he revealed he had read a USA Today article about jury selection during the process, while a separate juror was axed over a response in her questionnaire indicating she thought Combs might have enough money to buy a way out of jail. However, this is where things get interesting. After everything was wrapped up, Diddy's legal team pointed out that the prosecution was going out of its way to exclude black jurors. Mark Agnifilo told the judge, "Your Honor, the government has struck 7 black people out of 9 strikes, which we believe amounts to a pattern. However, the prosecution didn't give them the satisfaction of a win. They explained that their selections were very diverse, with many non-white jurors. One prosecutor ran through neutral reasons as to why they made the strikes the way they did. One juror said he had a lack of candor with past incidents with police. Another juror had meandering and inconsistent answers. And another juror tried to walk back her statement that Combs is likely guilty of domestic in her jury questionnaire by later saying that victims can jump on a bandwagon. And so, the defense's applications about jury strikes were shut down since they failed to show purposeful discrimination. But this is where things get interesting. Johnny Depp's lawyer, Ben Chu, who famously represented the actor in his multi-million-dollar lawsuit against his ex, Amber Heard, has some thoughts on the matter. He was shocked to see the number of people who actually didn't want jury duty. Mostly, people line up like crazy for that sort of work in celebrity cases.
Well, it's taking longer than I would have expected. In the case of Depp v. Heard, everybody wanted to serve on the jury. So in many cases, as you know, jurors are trying to make excuses as to why they can't sit through a long trial. And 8 weeks, as you say, is a very long trial. But in these celebrity trials, I think people are more inclined to want to serve as a juror. So I'm a little surprised it's taken as long as it has.
Interestingly, Ben believes that the criminal aspect of the case might be working against Diddy. See, with the Johnny and Amber situation, it is only a civil matter. The stakes are not the same. So maybe that's why people were far more comfortable taking a front seat to the chaos.
That's a great point. In a civil trial, all that's really at stake is money. Also, in our case, it was reputation.
Sure.
So it was existential for our client. But I think that's a great point. When there is a prospect of somebody losing his or her liberty, that's a pretty weighty issue.
And that kind of complicates jury selection as well. Ben said that if he was defending Diddy, he would want someone who wants to serve. But more importantly, he would make sure to not include women and young adults in the jury because that could essentially sink Diddy's case for obvious reasons. It might be hard for some of these people to hear about Diddy's crimes.
I think you want somebody who wants to serve, someone eager to serve, because that suggests that person might be inclined toward a celebrity like Diddy. I would also, in this case, I would want men, not because men support it, but I could see this being very difficult for women jurors. I would want younger jurors as well. I don't know that older jurors would be good for him.
What's interesting is that Ben said the best strategy for Diddy would be to participate in the jury selection process, because as a man whose future was on the line, he could have a sixth sense about the kind of people who'd show him mercy. Now we're not sure about whether Diddy participated in the process behind the scenes, but what we do know is that he's been working incredibly hard to make a connection with those jurors.
Now, ultimately, it's the client's choice, and the client should be participating in the process, especially where it's here, his liberty is at stake.
And was that something that you had in your case where your client wanted to get involved in the jury selection process? Because it's been reported that Diddy has been almost like nodding to his attorneys or maybe even shaking his head regarding certain prospective jurors.
According to Ben, that's not exactly a manipulative tactic, since most people in Diddy's shoes would do the same thing. It gives them control in a situation where they have none. On top of that, Ben had some comments about the defense's application over the jurors' strikes. He thought it was an overreach since you can't always prove the discrimination in court. And that's exactly what happened.
I think it's, as you point out, I think it's extremely difficult, and I think the judges generally defer to counsel in making those decisions. And I suppose if you had something egregious where, for example, one side was striking all African-American women, then I think you would have a pattern that the court might call out. But I don't see that very often.
Apart from that, Ben made a comment about how Diddy's team might have the jurors followed around. Considering his life is at stake here, he would want those people to be as unbiased as possible. And, well, considering how Diddy's painted in the media, it would be in his best interest to make sure no one on that jury is swayed by anything on the internet. And this is where his shady skills come in, the one he has acquired over the years.
I would think that his counsel have a team of investigators following the jurors around to the extent they can and looking for any electronic footprint.
But honestly, the jury selection is the least of Diddy's right now. The trial's underway, and it's finally time to see if those expensive lawyers of his deserve their paycheck. And, well, fans don't think they do. See, the defense already had to concede that Diddy did have outbursts. Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson started off strong, telling the jury, "This is Sean Combs. During this trial, you are going to hear about 20 years of the defendant's crimes." Meanwhile, Combs' lawyer, Tina Urago, said this: "Sean Combs is a complicated man, but this is not a complicated case. This case is about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money. There has been a tremendous amount of noise around this case over the past year. It is time to cancel that noise." And that Combs outbursts, often fueled by alcohol, jealousy, and might have warranted charges, but not and counts. She also told jurors they might think Combs is a jerk and might not condone his kinky, but he's not charged with being a jerk, and well, that seems like almost half a defeat. Diddy's team probably thought that they were getting ahead of the entire thing by coming clean about the but the prosecution proved to be unforgiving. It doubled down on Diddy's confession and questioned their first witness about Diddy's demons as they showed jurors the CNN video of him putting his hands on Cassie. See, Ben actually predicted that video was going to be a huge problem for Diddy, especially after he made the mistake of releasing an apology video right after. Chu said, "I would not have had my client give a statement on the heels of the release of that video, and I certainly wouldn't have had him release that statement because I think it will be fodder for future examinations and deposition testimony, none of which is going to be good for Mr. Combs." Ben also said that Diddy would have a hard time denying the authenticity of the video after his apology. He's just thrown out the window any potential objection to the authenticity of the video. Also, I think what he said was really not helpful at all. And well, that turned out to be right. According to reports, Combs shook his head slowly side to side as the footage played. Jurors ended up seeing it 4 times as former hotel security officer Israel Flores testified, including once as Combs' lawyer tried to poke holes in his recollection. Flores told jurors that he came across Diddy near the 6th floor elevators while responding to a security call for a woman in distress. Combs, wearing only a white towel, was slouching in a chair with a blank stare, like a devilish stare, just looking at me. Safe to say, Diddy's not off to a great start. However, his lawyers are holding their ground. They attacked the second witness, Daniel Phillip, a professional S-worker. Basically, they destroyed his credibility by mocking his former employer, a male review show company whose slogan promised the ultimate ladies' night experience. FYI, Phillip was paid $700 to $6,000 to share the bed with Cassie while Combs watched and gave instructions. He'd been working with them since 2012. However, Phillip walked out when he saw Diddy throw a bottle at Cassie and then drag her into a bedroom at one point. So yes, Diddy's legal team is trying their best to stick to their defense strategy. According to CNN Entertainment, if his legal team's past arguments are any indication, an overarching theme of Combs' defense strategy will be that all relationships related to the charges were consensual. So therefore, even if those relationships were at times toxic, Combs' defense would argue that he cannot be held criminally liable. And that's exactly what's happening. Several of the key witnesses have been characterized by the defense as former long-term girlfriends. Meanwhile, Cassie was forced under cross-examination to read aloud explicit messages. The defense strategically chose texts that showed Cassie looking forward to sharing a bed with Diddy. There was one text where she wrote, "I'm always ready to f***." In another text, she wrote, "Me too. I just want it to be uncontrollable." You can see how these texts support the defense's narrative and place Cassie on the losing end. Jurors had varying reactions to the text messages. They were displayed on monitors in front of the jury box. One woman shook her head as a particularly explicit message was shown. A man stared intently at the screen, pressing his thumb to his chin. Other jurors appeared curious and quizzical, some looking at Cassie or jotting notes. Meanwhile, as Diddy's legal team did the work, the former music mogul looked relaxed in his seat, sitting back with his hands folded and his legs crossed. But Cassie was not relaxed. She complained that jurors weren't hearing the full context of the messages the defense was highlighting, saying, "There's a lot we skipped over." At the end of the day, all eyes are on Diddy right now. This is going to be a really long trial that'll change the face of the industry. And there have been a number of setbacks for each side so far. But what do you think? Or is Diddy really on the losing side here? Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and make sure to check out this next video.